Welcome into the Built on Air podcast, episode 7 of season 21. Getting close to the end of this season. Good to be back with everybody. Got a full house with us, Ali, Camille, myself, and special guest Drew Watley. Welcome, Drew.
Thanks for having me.
Good to have you with us. We're going to learn more about Drew and his story and background later on in the show. I'll first walk us through what we're going to be talking about. The Built on Air podcast is an hour-long show every Tuesday. Keep you up to date on everything going on in this world. We start with our round the bases of all the news and updates in all the different communities and what people are talking about. Then we will shout out to our sponsor, OnToAir, and how you can sign up and get your backups going. And then Drew will talk a little bit about him, hear his story and background and expertise. Then he's going to walk us through how he uses Airtable in his world of nonprofit and how Airtable can be used for that. He'll show us his base for organizing his data. Then talk about how you can join our community and be a part of us if you're not already. And then finally, Camille's going to walk us through interfaces, how to manage large data within a large table, lots of fields, how you can break things up to organize better a large data set. So with that, around the bases, a couple things we'll talk about. First, there was one new update. This was one that was not leaked in our community or anybody. Probably not the most exciting of feature announcements, but if you are an enterprise user and you need to have your own custom legal terms that people need to agree to before they get access to your, assume this is just on sign up. I don't think this is per base, but basically in the admin section, you can add your own custom terms and services, and then the user has to agree to them as they sign up. So exciting. You guys all antsy to use that one?
What's this? Sure.
I wonder if it relates to the portals, like trying to roll portals out. You end up with more outside users in enterprise environments.
Yeah.
Probably, because you can have a separate terms or series of terms for external users as far as Airtable defines external users. So that would make sense.
Absolutely. And with all like security compliances and stuff like that for larger companies, like the no code space has some catching up to do to like allow for a lot of those audits that you might have to go through. So this is probably useful in those cases, which is very cool.
Yeah. So yeah, that's my guess as well. I assume this will be part of the portal process as well. So anyways, if you need that, that's now available for enterprise scale and higher. Next one from LinkedIn. We talked about this last week. If right after the show, right after the show, you can go on over to Airtable's community, and Ben Green, who was on the show last week, will be leading a discussion for the marketing user group, Airtable Basics to Advanced Interfaces for Marketers. So kind of taking a live demo, moving from just the data layer and then how you could migrate that into the interface layer. So that will be right after us. And next one, this is a little bit technical, but a little bit interesting. Came across this last week. So React is like the main platform or main UI library that's very common in the development world, and what Airtable uses for not only for its own app, but also for custom extensions. And the team behind the software framework is getting rid of this Create React app, which is kind of how you manage things, and basically saying there's better alternatives to use. This is interesting because if you've built custom extensions, this is how Airtable custom extensions rely on this approach. So I'll be curious to see if they will migrate to something else, because they have not done a whole lot of they haven't given a whole lot of love to their custom extensions. So I'd be curious to see what they do.
Yeah, separate from this in the community, I believe it was Justin, was actively editing an extension and noticed that Chrome's security, Chrome keeps updating itself, it adjusts certain security flags, and one of them was required to develop an Airtable extension just the way that they configured it, and it made it pretty difficult because it was like a moving target, and this seems like another moving target for developing extensions for Airtable. It's an external change in configuration, but that has direct impact on what you can do without figuring out some workaround.
Yep. So yeah, and this, we also use this at BuiltOnAir. We were actually already in discussions of kind of doing an upgrade. So this puts more pressure on that. So we'll be doing that on our end. So that's kind of interesting. There's just more details on alternatives you can go to if you're using Create React App. Okay, next one, Softer, kind of as they're evolving. There was a big write-up in TechCrunch about how they've evolved to be more than just Airtable. You can now use them. They've always, I think, or for a while, they had Google Sheets and maybe one other, but they're really expanding their sources to where now you can go straight to Postgres or I think MySQL, bunch of other sources. So Softer is definitely expanding beyond just Airtable.
Yeah, and they're adding their own tables as well eventually, which will be really interesting.
Yeah. Similar, Glide did that as well. Glide has their own Glide tables.
So is Zapier now, and Stacker did a while ago as well.
Yeah.
I remember when JotForms added tables to their application, and I was just like, I already have a table. Like,
It did make it a little confusing.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how everything shakes out and how this plays out. But definitely, it's kind of interesting how it used to be everything would try to work together and then you could piece it together. And now everybody wants to be, which makes sense from a business standpoint. They don't want to be dependent on another business as they grow. So yeah, definitely interesting.
I found it really useful in Stacker to be able to create records and have like tables in Stacker that don't necessarily live in Airtable. Just if it's like fields as well, you can create fields within just Stacker, which is really nice because like if it's something that's like, I need to just format this field specifically just for the purpose of displaying it on the portal. I don't want to clog up my base. Put the field just in Stacker, which is great. So if that's kind of how this is going to work, I'm super excited.
Yeah, the downside is, well, and by design, that they like that because you're more locked into their platform. You can't easily switch. So yeah, that's something to be aware of. Yeah, one more from this was kind of interesting. Last week we talked about some of the AI builders, and one of them that we mentioned was Bolt. I think Lovable was the other one we mentioned. And this is interesting. Somebody's trying to use Bolt, which is basically a AI UI builder, and they're trying to replicate the UI of Airtable. And they're like, Bolt isn't quite there. This right here shows you kind of what it's come up with. Not quite to Airtable's level. So it'd be interesting if you could just say replicate Airtable and it builds the whole UI for you. I don't think it's quite there yet.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're making efforts. This is not built from their AI. This is just a screenshot of Airtable. Yeah. So, all right, moving on to the BuiltOnAir community. This is a nice little trick from Russ talking about doing an AI review of an outbound message in like your CRM system. So basically doing an AI review of the email that goes out, and AI is actually finding grammatical errors in the email going out. So just kind of a nice little trick of like, you could use AI to quality control your data. So that's a nice little trick there. One more, this was kind of cool. Charles, based off of last week's episode with Ben, talking about how to use AI for writing your scripts. Charles built up the confidence to put that to work. He used DeepSeek and used an existing script. I think this Airtable Junction, I think that's in the marketplace, if I remember correctly. But it didn't have the ability to use a view to limit what was getting linked. And so he wanted to insert a view. So he basically just copied that existing script and told AI, enhance this to incorporate a view filter. And it was able to do that. So that's kind of cool. There's the code if you're interested. All right. Here's one from Reddit, a Airtable guide. So master source reference sheet. So somebody that does coding and shared kind of some quick master source details. So it goes through all the concepts, but then it gets into how to do things. So if you want just kind of a cheat sheet for Airtable, this link will be available. It gets into even some code snippets. So if you just kind of want a quick reference guide to understanding Airtable.
That's nice. Stuff like the webhooks one, I feel like is common enough where that basic structure you could probably adapt into a lot of different use cases.
Yep. So, okay. Next one. This is from Table Forums. This was kind of interesting. So this is talking about Airtable forms and the nuance of it's kind of nice. It will remember if you fill out a partial form but you don't submit it, it will remember the information on your local computer, your local storage. So then if you like close the tab and then come back to it, what you had already filled out will still be saved there. But there's this nuance where he's saying he has like a table listing in an interface, and you click on a button and it takes you to this form, and it will, like, if you click on another record, it will pre-fill some fields, but then it will remember the fields that you had saved in your local storage, but those could have been to a different record. So you have like this mismatch of data, and it's kind of annoying, and you have to click the clear form to reset it all. I don't know if you guys ran into issues with that local cache.
No, but now I'm worried.
I haven't run into issues with local cache on forms, but like a lot of embedded stuff, I wish there was a way to just turn off caching, like where I have a calendar view embedded in a website and it keeps remembering that I had flipped it to March at some point, and I just want it to always be current. And I don't feel like there's a way to do that without filtering it through a different software. And yeah, some of the caching operates in quirky ways that I don't seem to be able to get at.
Yeah.
I feel like for the form, maybe if you have URL parameters, it should ignore the cache just across the board, just so that you don't run into.
I think it does for the fields that you have URL parameters. I think in this case, there was like
There's other
fields.
forms. Yeah.
There was like a combination.
I would prefer it do one or the other. Like if it knows some of them are pre-filled, just assume that the other field should be blank.
Oh, well, and I see Scott has viewed this, so I'm sure he made the comment, which is one of the forever rules of Airtable, is that go use fill out. Yep.
Yeah. And exactly. But fill out, actually, I ran into a similar issue in fill out, but there is an option to shut off the storing of those partial submissions.
Yep.
And that's actually a good thing to note, is that if you do have that on, so it can be useful in some cases, but if you have the toggle on, which it is on by default, to allow users to resume their submission if they've left the form and then came back to it. If you make any changes to the form, or rather to data that is being displayed in the form from other records, like say it's a sign-up form for an event, and you show once they select the event, you show in like a banner what the date of the event is. If you change the event date in the dates, but somebody has a partial submission that they haven't submitted yet, and they go to resume it, that's not going to show you the updated date. It'll only go back in time to where it was at when that person started the submission. So it can cause big problems.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Very cool. So definitely the answer is fill out. It was interesting. He asked ChatGPT, and they said try add this URL parameter, but that does not work for Airtable forms. That's one of the things with AI. It may give you suggestions that aren't true.
Yep.
All right, last one. I don't know if anybody else ran into this. I guess last week there was a bug or something where Control F wouldn't get you into the search box, and apparently other people were running into this, and so it wouldn't bring up the search inside of a base, but it looks like it got fixed. So if anybody sometime last week was not able to search your base, they must have been playing around with something and overrode that short code.
Oh, that would have driven me crazy if I noticed it. Glad I didn't. One thing I have noticed that's really driving me insane is I used to, if you double click on a field to like edit the configuration and then rename it, I used to be able to just hit enter or return on my keyboard and it would save it. That I can't do that anymore.
Oh, interesting.
It's driving me, it's really slowing me down, because I used to type enter, and now I have to click the save button, and I'm like, ugh.
There's also, I feel like depending on what interface page you're on, there's search in there, but if you hit Control F, it'll do like your browser's find in page. So like Control F works, I think it should work universally within the data layer, but within interfaces, it doesn't quite play nicely with the search box there.
Yeah. Yep, very true. But that does come in handy. All right, that concludes our updates on everything going on this week. And if you are running your business on Airtable, best practice is to make sure your data is stored externally outside of Airtable and not rely just solely on Airtable's backup. That's where On2Air comes in. You can back up your data to Box, Dropbox, Google Drive, or OneDrive. And you can also back up all of your attachment data, all of your metadata, all of your record data, and also be able to restore it back into Airtable. So check it out, On2Air.com. Use promo code BuiltOnAir for a discount and start backing up and rest easy, knowing your data is backed up at night. Okay, with that, Drew, I'm gonna make you big here. So give us a little bit of context, who you are, what you're up to, what your background is, and how you came into the world of Airtable.
Yeah, certainly. So I'm Drew Watley. I'm the lead resource data specialist with Opportunity Council in Bellingham, Washington. Opportunity Council is a community action agency. So it's a nonprofit started in the mid 60s to try to, as part of like LBJ's War on Poverty. So it's really about delivering services to folks who are in need. But I've been working in nonprofit fields before this. I originally came to Airtable as an education manager at the local museum here because when you're doing museum work, you have like 100 different hats, and I needed some way to automate my workflow so I could spin all those plates at once. And so like incorporating Airtable let me actually like run our docent program and book all our field trips and schedule all our field trips and, thing on track all of our attendance statistics, stuff on top of other stuff. I actually came to Airtable because I was overhauling our guided tours program, and Sign Up Genius is horrible and I don't like it. And I was looking for a very specific feature in like being able to have our older leaning tour guides be able to sign up for multiple tours at once. And like all of the scheduling software I was running across, like Calendly, you would have to like resubmit over and over and over again. And I was able to build my own scheduling interface or scheduling setup with Airtable that they could schedule like 5 at a time. So that's what got me into Airtable. But I moved all of our tour bookings and field trips onto Airtable, and in the process kind of became a little bit of like a local Airtable expert. And then it turned out that our local community action agency was hiring for a database admin, specifically Airtable focused. And I was like, well, heck, I basically do that. So that's how I ended up in this role.
Nice. Did you have any formal technical training or background?
Nope, I have a Bachelor of Arts in History and a Master's of Arts in Teaching History. So I just like tech things and I like tinkering around, and Airtable is at that perfect layer of just you can tinker around and figure out a bunch of really cool stuff to do. I still haven't yet made the jump into like learning JavaScript for the scripting components. I still kind of just like poke around there. But all the formula stuff, the interfaces, automations, really make it an amazing no code tool. And so I was able to get a lot accomplished. Yeah.
Any favorite kind of features or experiences working in Airtable?
I mean, I can think of a lot of different answers to that question. I will say one of the coolest ones I stumbled across was the URL checker script. If y'all remember that one, where it will, because I keep a big long database of URLs and need to occasionally check if they're active. And so having that URL checker script that will just ping it and say if it's a 404 or not is super duper cool. That's a really small one that I think is awesome. And yeah, just again, the ability to build out these systems in a way and make them all flow however I want to is super handy. Yeah. But nowadays, I kind of help manage the data side for a human resources directory, or not human resources, that's the wrong term. Social services directory is a better term.
Gotcha.
So
maybe
here,
real quick before we jump into that, favorite or wish list item, is there something you're like, I need Airtable to add this?
I mean, God, there's always a million things that you want. I really wish we could collaborate a little bit better without having to pay for as many seats, because working in nonprofits, like I will say, Airtable's nonprofit discount is super handy. And I've used it at multiple different spots. But at the same time, $144 a seat is still prohibitive if you're trying to do certain things, and the portals are still kind of prohibitive. So I wish there was some ability to provide comment level seats without having to pay for every individual user. I mean, I get the economics. And then another thing that we were actually just talking about before we went live is I wish the Airtable universe was a little bit was maintained a little better. Because I work for nonprofits. We try to share, we don't gate stuff away. So I want to put stuff up on the universe to share. And it's hard to search. It doesn't feel updated. It's not really it just feels like it hasn't been touched in 5 years or more. And so I really wish they put a little bit more oomph behind the universe sharing capabilities, because as this podcast and the community show, there's a lot of really cool stuff that people who use Airtable like that make and they want to share, but it's kind of hard unless you are in the Slack for onto Air, or not onto Air, onto BuiltOnAir, which is the plug for the Slack channel. There you go.
Yeah, very true. Awesome. Any questions, Camille or Ali, before we jump in?
No, I totally agree, though. The
Yeah.
universe needs some love.
I put something on the universe recently, and I had to have a whole separate testing session to be like, what comes with a universe now? Because, there's interfaces are new and automations at some point in time didn't come with it, and it doesn't feel updated, to your point. It's really not.
And like I just learned, because I've been trying to do some automations come with it, but they don't come turned on.
Exactly.
So like the user document I have that goes along with this whole thing I'm going to show, like one of the first setup steps is turn on the automations. Yeah.
Awesome. Let me bring this back up. Cool. So as you mentioned, you've been in the nonprofit world for a while and have some expertise on how Airtable works in that. So you're going to show us some of the tricks of the trade. Let me bring your screen up. Okay, you're on.
So as I mentioned, like I really do love Airtable's like nonprofit pricing plan, like $144. You get a lot of bang for your buck.
That's
on the team plan.
annual, not monthly,
annual.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They charge it annually and they'll prorate it. So they don't give you the monthly option for nonprofit pricing. Or for the discount at least. The specific one I'll talk about today is kind of how we're upgrading the way we maintain and store data for our social service directory. So this is kind of the front end of our social service database. We work with a partner, Connect 211, who orchestrates the data out of Airtable and formats it. So this is, the whole idea is we keep a running tally of organizations and services that provide benefits to our local community. So the local food banks, and you can click on food banks and you can see all the food banks in our area. All of this is hosted on the back end in Airtable in this big, well, it's not big, honestly, but this multi-table setup. And this is the version I inherited, which is of a certain, like it works with the way all the data is supposed to be formatted, but it doesn't take advantage of a lot of what Airtable offers. And so over the last few months here, I've been working with a couple of our developers to really take advantage of what Airtable, like implement, make sure it fits the same standard, but then using some of the advantages of Airtable to further the way this works. So we've kind of reformatted in order to help a whole segment of people, because the other thing is a lot of this is for folks who do not have a lot of time and don't have a lot of experience beyond a basic Google Sheet or Excel sheet. Like I am kind of, I have the luxury of having a role in which I can work on development of this, but a lot of people were sharing this with a lot of partners who are trying to maintain resource lists, do it an hour here, 2 hours the next week. They don't have time to dive deep into the way all these things are set up and orchestrated. And they're doing 4 other projects. So this is kind of meant to be a really basic level, but then have some advanced level features because I wanted it to have advanced level features. So it's kind of splitting the baby there. So we added interfaces to be able to control everything through interfaces because the previous version was only at the data layer. So just a simple, dashboard hub. I really do like the dashboard concept that they added. I think it's really helpful for, being able to communicate to partners really easily. So we've got all of our different links to the different pages here. Then we've got resources and we've got add, edit, verify, and import. So we've got different interfaces to add a new resource, to edit an existing resource. To do verifications, because that's one other thing that we're really, one of the big projects behind this is like trying to federate data about social services and feed it all into kind of a group that then can distribute it elsewhere. So that like we're up in Washington State, but we're a local community in Washington State. And the idea is to eventually get to a point where we learn about our local resources, we input them into the system, and then it federates up to the like Washington 211, the bigger statewide org for getting people connected with services. But part of that is communicating and tracking when we last made sure a service was available, so that information is not out of date. And so there's a whole verification workflow that's set up. And then there's also, and this is one of the more fun things to me, this import version. So this whole standard is a data standard. So it breaks everything out into multiple tables of data objects. But again, we're working with a lot of folks who are used to just putting things on a single row in an Excel spreadsheet. So we wanted to make it approachable and then be able to convert that into data. So this is essentially a single row Excel spreadsheet where people can put the org name, the service, their description, etc. And then at the end, there's a transform button. And this is where I pulled in automations to generate all of the relevant data objects out of this one sheet. So basically they put it all in, and when they click check button, when they check mark it, then it pops it into all of the different tables where it should be. So it creates an org record, it creates a service record, et cetera, et cetera. So there's that. And that's one of the really approachable components. The other part that is really useful for especially smaller groups is I added these search interfaces that people can just plug on to a web page. They can just embed it. Because you can embed Airtable interfaces. These are 3 different versions, just an overall a list by the various providers, organizations like the Poison Control Center or the Humane Society. What does the Humane Society do? They do spay and neuter assistance. And then here is all the information for it. And then we also have taxonomies, like categories. So, what community garden resources are there? And all of these can be plugged in, can be, searchable. Although, as mentioned in the previous rounding the base, if you try to control F with this embedded, it'll like wig out a little bit on you. But you can still use the search features and just embed this in a website. And that way, again, less technical users can get the hurdle of getting this embedded on a web page once, and they don't need to worry about getting to the webmaster to update the links and update the information about, because especially a lot of these are governmental folks too. And it's like 4 months later, you finally get county IT to come help you with updating this link. And now now the one you needed to update is already expired. And so it's a easy way to plug that in and make it kind of go. Then if you go to the data layer, you can see we've got all the different tables here. So that's all been a lot of bringing people on board. The thing I really wanted was to be able to express a lot more specific granular data, because when I'm thinking about this kind of stuff, a lot of it is the library runs, rents out rooms at these 3 different locations, but not at this 4th location. And it's hard, the way it's previously set up, it's hard to express that. Or the hours are different at this library versus these other 4 libraries. And so we were able to incorporate this service at specific location table that then can use custom names and custom descriptions that will import the generic one. But then if I don't like that, if it's something different, I can just type whatever I want in and it'll overwrite it. And so that's all formula based. So 211 Washington 211 is redundant. So I just want this to say Washington 211 instead of that combo. Come on, buddy.
It's still saving.
Oh, yeah.
Demo.
Of course, anytime you demo, it wants to
There we
take
go.
forever. There we go. So it can just automatically update names and titles. So I can change it, tweak it however I want to tweak it, which is the like special sauce from the data management perspective that I wanted. So yeah.
Nice.
We also use Airtable to run an event calendar. It's a really simple setup, incorporating fill out forms to embed a calendar, fill out form to populate the calendar, and kind of do events because they're a lot more transitory rather than services, which are ongoing. So we use Airtable in a couple different ways, but this I think is really cool. I've been really working to try to make it approachable as well as powerful. And the reason I started talking about my complaints about the Airtable universe is because it is up on the Airtable universe if you can find it. I've had a heck of a time searching for it. We can share the link. I will definitely put the link in someplace if you are interested in it. But it is up. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
a couple questions.
Yeah.
What has what challenges? How has adoption been? Have people been able to generally pick this up, or have there been challenges with getting people to adopt it?
So right now we're working with a partnership of early childhood coalitions. And what's been really interesting is we've given this older version to one or two groups that didn't really pick it up right. The data was really messy. I actually transitioned their data into the new format 2 weeks ago, and it was like I did a bunch of data cleanup because it was not properly formatted. So it kind of showed there was a bit of an onboarding issue. And right now we're just finalizing this version. So I keep, and of course this is the way of things. Like I always find new things to add. Like anytime I talk to someone, they're like, well, can we export the data to share with a partner? I'm like, yeah, I can build an export. But we're kind of in the process of updating it. But I think bringing people on board has given me a lot of ideas about the necessity of onboarding. We created like a 10-page document, like a Google Doc README for this whole thing. And I'm also going to be pretty hands-on, bringing people on at least initially to make sure that they kind of get it. Because, as when you get into this and you can spend 2 hours, 3 hours digging through the base, you get it. But when you only have 15, 20 minutes here and there to interact with it, then it's you need it really guidelined. And that's the reason for the interfaces too, because the previous version didn't have any interfaces.
Gotcha. And then have you seen other partners or something asking about this and picking up Airtable themselves?
Yeah. I mentioned that kind of that coalition we're working with. The other thing is this is all part of a bigger push from Open Referral to create, as I mentioned, kind of this federated data universe. So to get all of social service data in the same format, so that then it can be shared. And one of the things with Airtable is a lot of these human services formats prior to a couple years ago with Airtable, you would pay 10, 15 grand a year for bespoke systems, bespoke data systems to keep that data, verify it, and the fact that it's $144 a year rather than 15 grand is a huge difference and makes it a lot more viable for folks. And that pricing is one part of it. The other element is because Airtable, it's online. So you've already made the jump from a siloed Excel document that just one person has that isn't online versus Airtable. Now the data's online and it's in a proper format. Then the next step is figuring out the APIs and the permission structure to send the data up. But at least it's online, at least it's there and can theoretically be accessed, as opposed to being in, again, somebody's, on somebody's C drive in a Excel 2000 file that nobody looks at.
Yeah. Very cool. Awesome. Any future enhancements, kind of roadmap, or anything else that you're looking to add to it?
Right now, I'm just adding stuff whenever I meet with whenever I meet with partners. I'm just like, oh yeah, we should add that. We should be able to search by service area. So there's little tweaks here and there. This I'm hoping to kind of get pushed out, and then I'm going to start looking at the categorization, because our categorization we use is pretty old, and it's not the greatest. And so I want to overhaul the categorization, but that'll be a whole nother big bucket of worms.
Nice. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Drew. We'll move on. And so the website, in case it's pretty specific to your neck of the woods, but if people want to check it out, what's the website?
The website is whatcomresources.org. Yeah. And that's our directory, social service directory. So if you do need something in Bellingham or one of the surrounding communities, check it out. Yeah. But then also, again, if you want that kind of database system, it is on the Universe, and I will share it, either in the chat or on the Slack channel.
Okay. Sounds great. Thank you, Drew. Awesome. If you want to join our community with Drew and many others, we have thousands of Airtable users in the BuiltOnAir community. Join us, builtonair.com/join. We'll get you in. It's free to join. Also sign up for our newsletter. Keeps you up to date on all the news going on. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on all the socials. Love to have you as part of our community. Okay, Camille is going to walk us through interface design with large data fields.
Yeah, so this is kind of inspired by a problem that someone on my team at work ran into, in that the base he was building was very large and complex, and there was one particular table that had 1 trillion fields. Airtable's default maximum fields per table is 500, but the maximum number of fields you can display on an interface page, I think, is 200 for reasons unknown. So we didn't know that. We just assumed you could put all the fields on an interface and it would just be slow if you had 500, but that wasn't the case. So his problem was it had, hundreds and hundreds of fields for a reason, and all of them were relevant, and he needed to show all of those fields in one way or another. So there's a couple of ways that you could end up doing that. You could split a record into multiple records across different tables, and that would let you segment your fields by like type or category or whatever breakdown would make sense. And while that works, we weren't too keen on separating them into a different table for a variety of other reasons that had to do with how that data was connected to other bases in our ecosystem. So the question was, could we maintain one table with multiple record pages depending on what information you wanted to see? And the answer was yes, but it did take a little bit of finagling in order to get it to work. So I'm going to do my best to explain the general process of what we did. So first things first, this table has very few fields in it just for simplicity's sake. But if I open up a particular record, you could see there's some information about this record that is related to a person, and some that are kind of like finance related fields, and then some fields that are related to cars. So if I wanted to split this one record into multiple detail pages by the topic, I would want to break it down into those 3 different groups. So one way to do that, if I go back to my data, what I've done is I've included a linked record field that links to itself. So there's an automation on an ongoing basis that just says whenever the self-link field is empty, go ahead and fill in the self-link field with its own Airtable record ID to make sure that those are always lockstep. That way we don't have additional tables where I'm splitting up this one record into many records. I just have one record linked to itself. And because this is a linked record field, that means in interfaces, I can now start to break up that interface, that detail page. So if I scroll and I look at the list view, the thing that I'm first clicking on to open up one of the detail pages, you can see I'm opening up something called record detail. And if I click into one of them as an example, I'd be able to rename this a little bit more easily. So I'm going to call this overview page, because we're going to end up making multiple different detail pages about this one detail page, if that makes sense. So first things first, I need something to click on. So I'm going to get my self link here, and I'm just going to get it on the page. And I'm going to say, allow me to click into record details, but I don't want to click into overview page. I want to create a new layout. So for this, I'll say personal details. And with that, I can add just the few fields that have to do with the person. So all of these fields are relevant. And then I can just give some names along the way so I know what I'm looking at. And now I have, at least in the working implementation, I can get rid of all those fields I added to that one detail page. I have this sort of broken out. Now this doesn't look pretty, and we're going to make adjustments to make this work, or at least look a little bit better. But that's the general idea that we want to go with. The next things to do would be, again, you want to plan out in advance how you want to break up your table if you're trying to do something like this. So I know what the next two I would want to do would be all the finance stuff, and then the car ones go into their own interface page. And before I do that, I want to adjust this to be a view, and I want probably a list view is probably the best I can get it. And what I have done is I've made a few helper fields. So the reason I've done this, and if I look at the data layer just so we can see, these are just formula fields. They all say the same thing: open personal details, open finance details, open car details. So you can get an idea of how I'm going to do this for the other groups as well. I did this because I wanted readable text that wasn't just the same name of the record again, and any field could have done. However, I felt that this would work a little bit better if I said what I'm about to open. And then if I take away the name, Airtable let me do that. When we launched this implementation that I was describing earlier, we were able to not have any title for this section. I don't think Airtable will let us do that anymore. So I think this has to say something, which is unfortunate. I just wanted this one line that says open personal details. And because this is a list view, this doesn't have to say helper one. I could just say open, for instance. So playing around with exactly what this looks like, your mileage might vary in terms of what you personally prefer. But what I'm going to do is now I can just duplicate this section, and instead of showing helper one, I can say helper two. So I have different text being displayed, and then my record details, instead of doing personal details, I want to do yet another layout, and I'll call this finance details. And then same thing as before, I'm going to pick the fields that are relevant. So card type, currency, stock, and stock. And then I would do that one more time for the car details. And by doing this, it allows me to keep, if I had more fields on this record, I would be able to keep just the ones that are relevant to like all the different segments of this record. So any high level fields that you'd want to show up top, but you can leave all like the specific details in these separate detail pages. So this would be just the car ones. Okay, so I think I have them all in here. And then the last thing would be swapping out helper 2 for helper 3. So if I publish this now, this is what it would look like, where if I open up a particular record, I'd be able to pick which segment of the record is relevant to me. So if I want to open up the finance details, I can click this and just get the finance related field for that same record that we clicked on. So this is really useful if you have a lot of fields, and I'm talking hundreds of fields that people still want to look at. A lot of times I have very complex tables with like 25 or so helper fields that someone never needs to see. But if you have a lot of fields that you do need to display on an interface, I do find that this is nice in that you can keep your data structure the exact same, and with a little bit of finagling, control what the interface experience is. So having very specific display of what these fields look like. It's also helpful for permissioning. So if I go back into edit, depending on what plan you're on, you can conditionally hide these interface groups and instead show a different one. So if I'm a manager, for instance, versus just a teammate of somebody, I might want to have a different detail page design for managers than I do teammates. So I could conditionally hide this section and instead have another one different detail page. So there's a lot that you could do with doing something like this. But again, you're kind of beholden to what Airtable will allow you to do in an interface, meaning you got to give each of these a name that is helpful for you. Otherwise, in my case, they'll all just say self-link.
Yeah.
I love this. This is super, super cool. It's so funny. A friend of the show, Alicia, came up with almost exactly the same hack, and she had showed me this a while back, and I was like, you should show this on BuiltOnAir.
Too late.
I was like, great minds think alike. So shout out to Alicia, and also like this is just so creative. I like it's like I said a couple episodes ago, it's like bending Airtable to your will and linked record fields.
Yes. There's so many different ways to do basically what I've done. You don't necessarily have to convert them into view like I did. You could have just left it at the field and controlled like the preview fields that are available. And I guess I'll just show that. Self-link, I could just have left it like this, but if I changed the visible fields to, first name and last name, and then renamed it on here as personal, I could do that. And if you're trying to open or add new fields inside of one of these groups, doing it from here is a little annoying because Airtable assumes you only want that field on the page once, but you can, if you do it directly within the group, you can add the same field again. So same thing, it's just what visual do you prefer, in this list kind of thing or in Airtable's kind of default?
Yeah. Rather than the popovers, can you use the list hierarchies to nest a self-linking record? I haven't ever tried it.
Well, let's just see. I will start with just this one. We're going to change it into a view again and click into here so I can get hierarchy.
Interesting.
Am I crazy? Is it not here?
I think it's probably because do you have any other links to any other tables? Maybe it just Yeah.
And I was thinking more on the top level, like rather than inside the popover, like having like your personnel and then the drop down nested underneath to say the car details.
Okay, it doesn't want me to do that. So I could do nested records, but you could see that doesn't do anything. So Airtable doesn't like my attempt at doing what you're describing, but I do feel like that would be helpful because I think it's a little less janky visually than this, because we're always only showing one record, right? If we had multiple records, it wouldn't look as, silly, I guess. But again, there's pros and cons, because for each of these sections, you could add a description, and this is rich text. You could have links and whatnot. Again, you can control which fields are shown here. So if I still wanted to say, show me the first name and last name, I could still do that.
I wonder, the one thing that I still just don't understand why it is this way, but with the side sheet detail layout, the URL is a base 64 encoded string if you were to formulaically like try and get to this side sheet, versus if you do the full page, it's just the record ID.
Yep.
So one thing you could do to get around this in a similar fashion is if you had a table or even just several formula fields of the links to the detail pages that are full page. They have to be full page. That's the caveat. Yep. You could kind of do something like that, but yeah.
So I'm only sharing one tab, so it's a little difficult to see what you're describing, Allie. So I'm going to try and do it along. So URL formula. That's what the URL I'm given when I have the interface page as a full page layout. So what you're describing would be something like this, where you would put in the correct record ID, of course. And then for each detail page that you've made, in my case, I have 4, the overall, and then the 3 breakout ones, you would have a URL that takes you to the specific one that takes you into that particular detail page. So I would call this URL 1 or URL 2, or give them more helpful names since I know what each one should be. But that's another way to do it. And then on the, if this were a button field, on this page here, I could have just a couple of different buttons here and turn off, click into record details. That's another way to do it. So you would click directly onto the detail page you want.
Right.
Isn't that just perpetuating people having 700 open Chrome tabs, though?
For sure.
And if you're going to have an implementation where you have that many fields, and again, this is all predicated on you actually need to look at them. I can't stress that enough. There's so many cases where I have 200 something fields, and the people who are in the day-to-day, like doing their jobs with that data, they look at about 10. But on the off chance that you do need all of them, sometimes you might want different tabs just to keep it all straight, because there's a lot of, depending on what you're doing, there's a lot of information that goes into making up one object as far as Airtable is concerned.
Sorry.
Very cool. Alicia says, I wish Airtable would just introduce native tabs in these interface pages to save us the hassle of these workarounds.
Yep. There's a lot of strides forward I think Airtable makes in making interfaces pretty user-friendly, but there are little things where I'm like, I shouldn't have to build this. This seems silly. And yet here we are.
Yep. It was very nice. Hack that self-link, the power of the self-link. To have a whole show on secrets of the self-link.
I want that to be the name of a session at Airtable. Secrets of the self-link.
Yeah, there you go. That would be a good one. You've got your next episode. Awesome. Thank you, Camille and Drew. Thank you for joining us. Glad you could be with us. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we will see you next week. It'll be our final episode of the season, so be sure to join us next Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern. Have a good week, everyone.
Bye.